Hi, everybody. This is Progressive Short Takes. I'm your host, Joe Firestone, and welcome to you all. Well, of course, you've all heard about the bill from the problem solvers in Congress, quote unquote. That is, the problem solvers who maybe solve one problem and then make another, right? The problem solvers. Well, they're trying to put a band aid on a problem and then to create another potentially larger problem. Okay. And what's basically happening is you've all heard about this $908 billion relief bill, which is going to help state and local communities somewhat. It's going to give them some aid. It's going to release some funds for handling the coronavirus. That stuff is good. It's going to restore unemployment insurance payments for people. There may eventually be a moratorium on evictions again. I guess that's something really gaining traction to be placed in a final version of this bill. It's going to postpone again the repayment of student debt. Okay, none of this relieves the debts or takes care of the back rent or anything like that. By the way, news has surfaced that now back rents for millions of people who now owe an average of $6,000 in back rents. Where are they going to get the $6,000 in back rents? They're not going to get it from the extra $300 a week, okay, in unemployment insurance that some of them may perhaps get. No, they're not going to get it, okay, from there. And what is the price? What is the price for getting the benefits of the $908 billion? The price is Mitch McConnell wants sweeping corporate immunity from suits that charge neglect in the workplace, exposing people to the coronavirus. He wants to leave the corporations free to not worry about whether their employees are going to get the coronavirus or not, to not worry about whether they're going to create super spreader events every day at the workplace. That's the price he wants the other senators to pay. And of course, the senators on the Republican side are perfectly willing to pay this price because they care about the donors, they care about the corporations, they don't care about their people. But disturbingly, some Democratic senators are now weakening and suggesting that they are prepared to pay the price. Specifically, Senators John Warner of Virginia, Joe Manchin of West Virginia, and Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire. Sources of Dave Dayen at the American Prospect, okay, his sources are indicating that they're conceding to the expansive language on holding harmless the corporations that Mitch wants to put in to the latest coronavirus relief bill. Now, this relief bill is a poor substitute for relief anyway. It does very little. It doesn't have stimulus checks in it. It's got $300 a week. What is that for someone behind in rents by $6,000? I mean, that's not going to save anything. So Mitch has been warning for ages about how the corporations need this liability protection because there's going to be an avalanche of lawsuits. Well, they haven't had this liability. And out of 6,500 pieces of COVID-related lawsuits, only a couple hundred cases involve wrongful deaths or conditions of employment, like lack of PPE equipment or exposure to COVID-19 at work. There's no sign of a wave of cases to come. No sign of it, as Dave Dayen says. Because these cases would be extremely hard to pursue and prove, especially if you have one or two exposed individuals against a big corporation with a legal department. So, why do they need the liability protection? He wants 5-year liability protection. He wants to move all covered tort cases to federal court where his far-right judges would get their hands on the cases. The far-right judges he confirmed. It bars federal agencies from enforcing or even investigating workplace standards. It would basically kill OSHA. They couldn't investigate violations of workplace standards. It limits liability for PPE that causes injury, as long as the FDA approved the PPE. It amends the WARN Act, which requires notice for mass layoffs for the duration of the emergency, giving them the ability to have mass layoffs during the emergency. This is the giveaway he wants. And these Democrats are preparing to fold. Now, some Democrats in the working group have attempted to offer other options to address COVID exposure litigation that fall short of complete immunity for the corporations. But Dick Durbin, who's been leading the way on this, has been getting undermined by Warner, Manchin, and Shaheen, who are willing to just take the deal. But Dave Dayen calls this a hostage situation, as do his sources, as does anybody looking at it. Of course, it's a hostage situation. It's McConnell, quote, demanding his language without much of a policy rationale, and the 3 Democrats acceding to it. But now there's a new element in the situation. There's Bernie Sanders and Josh Hawley, who want to add $1,200 stimulus checks, to the package as the price of their voting for it. And supposedly, this is starting to get people to soften on whether there should be stimulus checks in these bills or not. I don't know if the Hawley-Sanders axis and, of course, the opposition of the squad in the House to a bill without any stimulus checks, is going to have a good effect. Because Mitch doesn't care about anything. He doesn't care about people. He's convinced that if the economy collapses, that burden is going to fall on Biden and that he'll win again in 2022. And he doesn't care how many people die because they go into homelessness and become even more vulnerable to the coronavirus. He doesn't care about what happens to the economy. there are many people who've been very unhappy with Nancy Pelosi because she would not take the $1.8 trillion deal from Donald Trump, which actually, I think it's pretty clear, by the time Trump ended, he actually went to offering $2 trillion. And she would not take that deal because she said it wasn't strong enough on measures to fight the coronavirus. Okay, but people have been dumping on Nancy Pelosi for doing that. Well, what about the months and months and months and months that Mitch McConnell did nothing? And what about the months and months and months and months when Donald Trump did nothing? Then he began to negotiate. And then he wouldn't just take Nancy Pelosi's deal. Why not? I mean, why not? Why wouldn't he take it? What was wrong with a $2.2 trillion deal? Why isn't it as much his fault as Nancy Pelosi's that he wouldn't take her deal? Her deal was a compromise. She originally went in with a $3.4 trillion HEROES Act. Then she unilaterally negotiated with herself and went down to a $2.2 trillion HEROES Act. Is it any wonder she didn't want to come a little further? Now, I'm not saying she was right about that. But what I'm saying is there is plenty of blame to go around. It doesn't just fall on Pelosi. Much of it falls on McConnell, if not most of it. And he ought to pay the price. He didn't pay the price in this election. Why not? Because voters weren't paying attention. They didn't understand that they had to reject the Republican senatorial candidates all across the board, giving the Democrats a big majority in Congress if they wanted to get relief from COVID, economic relief from COVID. They didn't associate those two. Now, maybe Biden was partly to blame on that because he wasn't aggressively promising big economic aid to people during the campaign. I think he ran far too conservative a campaign. That was a big reason why people didn't get the message. But the point is, it should have been obvious to the voters that Mitch McConnell was the one who had been blocking economic relief all that time. And Trump, too, through most of the summer. He was willing to do nothing. And when the negotiations started, and he turned them over to Mnuchin, so then Mnuchin started stalling himself. He didn't want to go the last mile to actually have a deal. Maybe Mnuchin wanted Trump out. Yes, maybe he did. I mean, maybe Trump wasn't Mnuchin's dream candidate. They were all involved in playing political games. And the final thing with respect to Trump, Trump could have had a stimulus bill from Nancy Pelosi easily if he had done the following. If he had withdrawn the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett, called Mitch and said, Mitch, I'll resubmit the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett when I see a stimulus deal that you and Nancy Pelosi have agreed upon on my desk for signature. I want it on my desk for signature. When I sign it, I will resubmit Amy Coney Barrett's name in nomination. Mitch, the only way you're getting Amy Coney Barrett is if I get my stimulus deal. But stupid Trump never saw that. How do I know he was being stupid? Because no one can tell me that Donald Trump cared more about confirming Amy Coney Barrett than he did about securing his own re-election. he might have gotten that re-election. If he had forced Mitch to concede on a stimulus bill, which he had the power to do, because if there was anything Mitch wanted more than the nomination, the confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett, I don't know what it was. But Trump and his advisors didn't think about how to hold that over Mitch's head and force Mitch to come to the table. So all kinds of people have been at fault so far. They all should have been replaced. The public should have voted against them all. But instead, they voted in Kentucky 60-40 for Mitch McConnell. And across the nation, they gave the Democrats only one seat, only one additional seat, when they could have given them 13-14 additional seats. There were that many races that were close. And the public failed to deliver. It failed to deliver. The people failed themselves. And of course, all the politicians failed too. Someone's got to say that. I'm the only one saying it. Anyway, this has been Progressive Short Takes. Thank you for coming. I'll see you soon for a new Progressive Short Take.